I'm Zach with TeachFX. Thank you so much for joining this fireside chat with our special guest, Shawon Jackson of Vocal Justice. Before we jump into the meat and the content of this conversation, I want to just provide a very brief overview of TeachFX and why we're hosting this fireside chat. So I will share my screen here briefly. Give me a thumbs up if you can see all that. Great, fantastic, thank you. So TeachFX is a teacher learning technology organization, and our big mission is to promote more meaningful and equitable student voice in the classroom by empowering teachers with really personalized feedback on their teaching and customized professional learning experiences. And we do this work for three really big reasons. One is about the primacy of student voice. And we know students need to speak in order to learn. And when they speak more in class, they develop their own self-confidence. They perform better on standardized assessments. They get better grades. They have a better sense of belonging. All these things we deeply care about at TeachFX and that Shawon cares about at Vocal Justice, we believe in firmly here at TeachFX. Equity is a really big piece of it too. It stands to reason that if student talk drives student learning, if you change who does the talking, you change who does the learning. And we know special populations in particular, your English learners, your students of color, your students with disabilities, benefit the most from speaking in class, but often get the fewest opportunities to do so. There's a really big equity elements and opportunity gaps that we can address here through discourse and student talk. And the third piece, again, is about that feedback. It's our theory of change here, that when teachers need frequent, personalized, objective, and non-evaluative, non-judgmental feedback to really change how they teach, to create the opportunities for all of our students to engage more meaningfully in the learning in class. So that's where our platform comes in, TeachFX comes in. We make a platform, an app that teachers use in their classroom to get regular feedback on equity and student voice and other classroom dynamics, much like an instructional coach would give. It works really simply. Teachers download the app to their phone, tablet, or laptop, and they record their class. They literally hit one button. They can set a phone down, for example. The app listens to the discourse patterns, and then at the end of class, it analyzes those discourse patterns and surfaces them in the form of insights for teachers to reflect on. And they really run the gamut, these insights. It's from your talk ratio, for example, how much time was teacher talk versus student talk, how many open-ended questions that you asked, your use of wait time. We transcribe the class so you can see what language, academic discourse did I use versus my students, for example. And we combine that data for teacher reflection with professional learning experiences on a host of topics that help teachers really build their capacity to move the needle, right? To get students more meaningfully and equitably engaged in class. And these are just four of the most popular themes we've used in 60 plus school districts around the country now. And lastly, we've been really motivated and excited by the results we've seen across the country. When teachers use TeachFX to reflect on their instruction, they create more meaningful and engaging learning experiences with way more student talk in our classrooms. So that's been really exciting. I am going to stop sharing, well, I'll go here because before we jump in with the conversation with Shawon, I want to give you all an opportunity to meet each other. So I'm going to create a couple different breakout rooms here. And I want to encourage you all to introduce yourself, share your name, role, where you're coming from, and what's one thing you hope to learn in this session together. That sound good? Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to send everyone to breakout rooms here in one moment. And we will be in these rooms just for about 4 minutes, okay? Great, here we go.
Zach, do you want us to join rooms too?
Yeah, please do. Please do. That'd be great. And hey, Lisa, thank you for joining us. Oh, I love the Santa hat too. Lisa, I just sent everyone into a breakout room to introduce themselves and share one thing they hope to learn in the session. Would it be okay if I assign you to one of those rooms?
Sure.
That'd be great. Thanks. And actually, you know what I might do instead, if it's okay? Maybe you and I can just chat here for a
Okay.
few minutes. That could be okay.
I just got the link to this morning. I'm in a new position at the district. I was an instructional coach for the last 4.5 years, and I'm a professional development coordinator now.
Oh, wonderful.
So, we're doing a session on building some sessions on deliberate discourse, helping students find their voice. So my director sent me this link to just see what it was all about and see what we can incorporate into our sessions.
And that's wonderful, Lisa. Thank you for joining us. And I'm kind of playing host here too. So I see you just joined us as well. But Lisa, what district are you coming from?
Apple Valley Unified School District in California.
Oh, wonderful. Now I'm in San Francisco. Where is Apple Valley in California?
We're about halfway between LA and Las Vegas.
Got it. Okay. So is it warm? Is it hot there? Oh,
in
really?
the summer, yes. No, it's freezing. It was in the 20s this morning.
How about that? That's too funny. So tell me a little bit more about this goal that you all have here around discourse and student voice.
Well, one of the challenges that we've seen since kids came back in person to school is that you hear teachers say they don't know how to talk to each other anymore. They don't know how to collaborate. They're more hesitant to contribute to conversations. And so we're looking at ways to specifically teach kids to do that. What do academic conversations sound like? How can we make sure that everybody's voice is being heard? So I'm in the process. We've had 2 sessions already, kind of the research behind how much time do we want kids to talk, and then how much are they actually getting to talk? And then what was our next? That was the research. And then having teachers create a vision based on, what they'd like to see happening in the classroom and the speaking and listening standards. So now we're kind of getting the next few sessions, we'll get more into more specific strategies and having students assess their conversations as well as the teacher being able to assess their conversations. So that's sort of the outline. It's 5 one-hour sessions after school. A lot of times we've done PD during the school day, but with the sub shortage, which I'm sure everyone is experiencing, we can't pull teachers out of the classroom to do that right now. So yeah, we working on our last 3 sessions will be after we get back from winter break.
I love that. We'll have to continue the conversation later because I'm just fascinated by what you're doing and think there's a lot we've learned from other school districts around the country to help advance that kind of work. Shoshana, thank you for joining us. I know I just sent you a chat. Would love if you're able to introduce yourself, tell us where you're coming from, what you hope to learn today.
I was at a high school in the Bronx, and elevating the voices of our students is definitely one of our big foci, and we serve almost exclusively Black and Brown children. And so I just wanted to, hear from other educators and have a chance to talk about this topic.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I love that we've got 2 corners of America here, the Southwest and the extreme Southwest and the nearly extreme Northeast. So it's just in this little breakout room. That's wonderful. I am going to bring everyone back here from the breakout rooms here. So just give me one moment to get that set up, okay? There we go. Hey, Deborah. Oh, muted.
I pressed the button too early. Oh,
that's okay. We're bringing everyone back now. Wonderful. It looks like at least one or two other breakout rooms are still coming back here. Hey, Monica, good to see you. It's great seeing a lot of old friends and some new faces here today. David, good to see you
as well, Zach.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Hey, John, thanks for joining.
Hi, Zach. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Good, good, good.
We've got folks from all over that I've met so far. Detroit, California, Southern California, New York, the Bronx. It's really great having everyone here. Okay, wonderful. I think all our rooms are back. Well, I'm going to dive right into the conversation with Shawon. Very, very brief introduction before we dive right in. Of Shawon. Over his young adult life, Shawon has helped hundreds of young people tap into the power of their voice and share their stories and ideas with others. He's worked in a variety of education organizations in the United States, in the Caribbean, in Central America, and he recently completed a special advisory with California's Governor Gavin Newsom. He's an impressive person, really. He's a student body president at Princeton for 2 years, and I'm proud to know Shawon through our connection at Stanford, the Graduate School of Business there. So after graduate school, Shawon started Vocal Justice. It's a public speaking program whose mission is to empower undervalued Black and Brown youth in our schools to become socially conscious leaders by teaching them how to communicate authentically and persuasively about social justice issues. So Shawon, thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you for the very kind introduction, Zach. Definitely took me down memory lane with some of the things you mentioned, and appreciate the kind words.
Of course. Well, Shawon, I'd love to start by just hearing your story. What inspired you to do this work, especially with undervalued Black and Brown youth in particular?
So my story begins when I was 6 years old. I had essentially the same baby face that you see here on the screen now, but I was walking down the hallway and my principal, who is a Black woman, called me into her office and I thought I was in trouble. But instead she looked at me and she said, "Shawon, I want you to give a speech for Black History Month." And I didn't realize it at the time, but that moment of delivering a spoken word piece in front of hundreds of people at our local community college helped me to feel confident in my own voice as a young Black boy in ways that I didn't realize until I became older. And I contrast that experience with when I first started teaching public speaking while I was in college. I was working at a youth correctional facility with some friends who began a public speaking course there for young men who were involved with the criminal legal system. And one of my students, who's a young Black man, looked at me and said, "I do not think I have a story to tell." And it was so disheartening because here was someone who had incredible insights on the world, in part because of the hardships they had experienced, but had received signals throughout their entire life. And in that moment saying that their story and their voice didn't matter. And as I continued teaching public speaking in the Dominican Republic and in DC, I noticed this recurring theme, working with young people of color in particular, that they hadn't received signals or opportunities that their voices matter and opportunities to actually speak up and share their stories, which was a huge missed opportunity because we know that storytelling is a powerful tool for social change. And if those who have been most proximate to the pain of injustice don't feel confident in their voice and prepared to speak up, then we're missing out on all of these powerful insights about how to really move the needle on so many social justice issues. So that was a big part of my motivation for launching Vocal Justice today and focusing on young people who have been most closest to the problems that we're trying to grapple with here in the US.
So tell me, that's, I think, a powerful story and a really powerful transition to Vocal Justice. I'd just love to hear more about what Vocal Justice does, and in particular, share well, why does that matter today in the United States?
Yeah, so our high-level mission at Vocal Justice is to inspire and prepare Black and Brown youth to advocate for social justice using their authentic voices. And the current way that we reach young people is through our teacher fellowship model. We train and compensate middle and high school educators across the US to facilitate our justice-oriented public speaking program within their school, either as part of an existing class or as an after-school club. We have 30 incredible educators across 15 states this year who are collectively working with 450 young people through our program. And our curriculum has 3 core elements that our young people engage in about 1 hour per week over the course of the school year. The first component of that curriculum is self-awareness, where young people reflect on and share their personal stories with other. We emphasize the asset-based nature of their narratives, recognizing that they get so many signals from the world saying that their voices and their experiences do not matter. So instead we flip that and say, let's talk about the beauty of your community and your identities and the expertise that you have based on your lived experiences. And then our second unit is social awareness, where young people have a chance to learn about social justice issues from a structural perspective. We make sure that they're not just thinking about it from an interpersonal perspective, but thinking about institutions and how they uphold oppressive forces in our society. And then our last unit is social change, where young people say, okay, I have a deeper understanding of myself and the social issues in the world around me. How can I now learn how to communicate authentically and persuasively about the issues that matter most to me? And to answer your final question, Zach, about why that matters in this moment, I mean, there's so many reasons, but I'll share just 2. I think the first is that there's a huge opportunity, I believe, in the education system right now to have more leadership development programming for young people of color who are not viewed as your high achieving student who's already involved in leadership programs. We focus so much on the core academic skills for those young people and how they're behind in terms of their reading and their mathematics, which is important. But I think at times we often overlook the leadership development we also want to do with those young people so that they speak up and against the issues that they're experiencing firsthand. And the second big reason is that because when we do that leadership development work with those young people, it not only improves their individual life outcomes, but it also changes what our leadership looks like across all sectors. So how amazing would it be if young people who experienced a lot of these hardships firsthand are now in corporations and in the government and in grassroots advocacy movements, speaking up authentically about their lived experiences and changing our perspectives about how we should think about these issues.
Thank you, Shawon. These are, of course, relatively early days for vocal justice.
Yes.
I'd be curious to hear what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned so far in doing this work?
There's been so many lessons. So for context, I began piloting vocal justice in summer 2019 when I just finished my first year of graduate school. I was in a Boston classroom at Jeremiah E. Burke High School, running the program as a summer school teacher. And I learned so much about what not to do and what to do with our curriculum. And the programmatic lesson that I learned here is that public speaking is incredibly scary, and it's often associated with white forms of communication that can be off-putting for a lot of the young people of color that we work with. So what was important as we were designing our program is that we don't just jump into the public speaking one-on-one lessons, but that we instead ground ourselves in doing more identity building and community building exercises. What I heard from my students directly is that they love sharing their personal stories and hearing the personal stories of their classmates because they often didn't get a chance to do that, and that they did not want to do the public speaking one-on-one curriculum at the start of the program. So we've intentionally made sure that the identity building and community building is what we do first. And then as we build community and rapport with each other, we transition to talking more about communication work. The second big lesson that I'll share is that this is a movement, and it's something that we are able to not just influence our young people with, but also our educators and school leaders. Our initial model for the program was me going into schools, running the program, and I was going to have a small group of facilitators do that. But we learned that when we have this train-the-trainer model instead, we can reach so many more young people. And it was something that our educators were itching for. When we started our teacher fellowship model in spring 2021, we heard from one of our teachers in Texas that it saved her teaching career. We heard from another teacher in New York that she made this an accredited course at her school because it's something that she wanted for her school community, and that they really loved being in community with each other as they're all delivering these programs in their respective sites. So I'm really excited that we have that model now where we can build a larger movement with our work as opposed to just having a small group of people going into schools to facilitate our program.
These lessons learned, I presume, probably change how you approach public speaking a little bit differently than your typical speech and debate program. Can you tell me more about how you're different and why that matters?
Yes. So this ties back to the first lesson that I was sharing about some of the assumptions that are rooted into traditional public speaking training, which is something I experienced firsthand as a speech team nerd in high school and in college, going to lots of competitions and learning about the right way to do public speaking. And reflecting on my own experience, I learned that that form of communication can often be rigid and does not allow for the authentic expression that a lot of our young people have rooted in their cultural identities. So some topics that we reflect on in our curriculum now is how can we really encourage authentic expression and not have you conform to a traditional way of public speaking that isn't true to who you are. And one of the topics that we explore in our curriculum, for example, is respectability politics, where we talk about the idea that a lot of people think that they have to conform that the way they speak and the way that they dress in order to be heard from their audience members. And we have an honest conversation to say, yes, to some extent, you do need to think about how you're coming off to your audience to make sure that your ideas can be heard. And at the same time, we don't want you to sell out or change parts of your true self, because that does a disservice to yourself as a leader and to the larger movement to say that different forms of expression cannot be valid. Another big part of our public speaking training is how we talk about trauma-based narratives. And a lot of communications work, we see that there are narratives of that sad story from a poor Black child in Chicago who really needs help. And that's used as a trope in order to get people to buy into different social justice movements. And while in the short term, it might be effective to some degree, we know that in the long run, it actually paints an incomplete picture about an individual and their community that can not reveal the beauty and the power that they have. So one of the elements of our curriculum too, when it comes to communications, is to say, let's talk about how we can speak with dignity about who we are. Yes, acknowledging some of the hardships that we've experienced firsthand, and also acknowledging the power and the strength that we have, so that we're not just promoting a trauma-based narrative, which doesn't paint the full picture about who we are. And I think that's really important with the communities that we work with, because we are working with young people of color who have been marginalized in so many ways, and we want them to know that they can highlight both the pain and the power of their narratives.
Yeah, these that really resonates with me, and it seems like these topics around identity, social justice, equity, critical race theory, they're all in the news, and I have certainly heard some educators say, yes, these are really important, but it's just too hot to touch right now. Like, my school board is going crazy, insert whatever thing you've heard and read in the news. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, Shawon, like, how do you respond to this kind of news and that kind of response?
Yes. I mean, it certainly is a hot topic now, and it's actually feedback that we've been seeing in multiple forms. When we were promoting our teacher fellowship, we had one of our teachers, a potential applicant, reach out and say, hey, actually in my state, they're really concerned about critical race theory, and I don't know if I can apply for this fellowship. And we also saw on social media when we were promoting our fellowship that lots of people were commenting saying that we're advancing a particular agenda and this is promoting socialism and isn't something that we want in our school. And so I completely hear the concern from school leaders to say, maybe this is too political or too controversial to do in our schools. But my response is that schools are places of politicization, whether we explicitly do it or not. And the status quo right now is that young people are being socialized through their schools and in their communities. And given that oppression seeps throughout all parts of our society, that socialization, unfortunately, is going to promote oppressive ideologies, even for people who have identities that are marginalized. And so if we don't take an explicit and active measure to counteract that status quo form of socialization, then we're going to maintain the status quo. And so I think it's up to us as educators, where we have this opportunity to really inspire young people to think differently about the topics in the world, to move the needle on that. And we know that when we have a small group of people who start to make that change, it will start to encourage other school leaders to do the same. But someone has to be courageous to make that first step. Otherwise, we won't see any change at all.
Hear, hear. We have a really amazing group of educators here, many of whom I've met before, some of whom are new to me. But I want to create an opportunity for us to go back into our breakout rooms and reflect on the following question here. I'll share my screen. the following questions. What steps have you taken to elevate the voices of your Black and Brown youth? Are there places where you get stuck in your efforts? And what questions do you still have for Shawon or others in the group? You know, we like to do these breakout rooms in part because we believe that we don't have all the right answers, neither Shawon nor us at TeachFX, but that you all are holders of really important knowledge, and we can learn from each other here too. So I will open up our breakout rooms here in a moment. We will be in those rooms for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and share out some of our responses together. Sound good? Wonderful. Okay, here we go. And I think there's a few of us here who might be unassigned, and I will leave us here in this main room to talk, if that's okay. Does anyone want to go first? What steps have you taken to elevate the voices of your Black and Brown youth in your context?
Oh, okay. So I'm guilty because I was assigned and I hit not now because I was hoping to be able to ask you a question. But so we're gonna do okay.
Feel free to ask your question.
Well, no, I feel really blessed because I think so I work with Anaheim Union, who piloted TeachFX, and
Great.
So I have like some. Are we just so I can stop being anxious? Are we going to get to a place where we talk concretely about the vocal justice curriculum and how we might be able to use it? Because Anaheim does TED Talks. They're doing this with, you know, we focus on our multilingual learners in the Ed Leadership program, the admin credential program, but they're doing TED Talks with multilingual learners with students with disabilities across the district. And so this piqued my interest as curriculum that would feed into supporting the TED Talk initiative that the district has.
Love that.
But I'm not like, I get that a lot of the conversation is how would you even get your local open to doing stuff like that?
That's a great question. And I think that's a great question. If you wouldn't mind, Jennifer, asking Shawon. And then I think he can also share in response to that, like how you would get started, you know, if this is something you wanted to implement in your own district.
Which is the thing you want me to ask Shawon, the specifics?
I'd love, yeah, just this, like, how do you get your local, you know, institution on board? And then what are the steps you might, you know, a teacher might take, for example, in that effort? Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I mean, I started out by saying I think I'm blessed in that in Anaheim, they're on, like, it's full steam ahead. They're on board. It's not how do you get your school board and like that context. It's so I don't want to take up the time. I'm just wanting to get to the specifics of how we would move forward with his curriculum. So,
right.
But I can ask him that question if you want me to.
Please do. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Anyone else?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
I think what we've in my district, we have some local authors who've written a counter narrative to the master narrative in my community. I work in El Monte, so we use that book, and our district is very open to working with the scholars of writing a more diverse history of our community. I think the other thing that we've done, some of us in my district, is written curriculum specifically to look at the different US history chunks through the lenses of marginalized communities, including African Americans, Asian Americans, because we have a substantial number of Asian Americans, Latinos. So we've actually written the curriculum, a couple of my partners and I, and so every unit that we have, we always include lessons and focus through those lenses. And it's a lot easier to do it in the 20th century units than in the earlier ones. I mean, to get at all of the different voices. So, and then we're also coordinating with our junior English teachers, and they're doing more diverse literature. And so there's a lot of overlap, and the kids, I think, really take to that.
Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah, where are you coming from?
El Monte High School. I think we've worked together. We did work together with that Lost LA curriculum.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to apologize because I joined late, just found out this morning. And so, so I'm not completely familiar of the work done by Shawon. However, addressing the question, last year I participated in a youth voice advocates teacher cohort organized by a local nonprofit here in the Bay Area, the Practice Space, and which focuses exactly on elevating the voices of underrepresented populations, underserved. And right now we are trying to, and say we, because since I'm out of the classroom and in a central position of piloting a program where especially targeted for multilingual learners, where they will work with the teachers. I feel like one of the barriers is not understanding how important the student voice is in daily instruction, and how to change our pedagogy to allow for this, across the entire curriculum spectrum. So that's I think my my steps, no? And I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited because also TeachFX and Zach and Deborah and everyone there has been very inspiring to me in, this is my passion, and since I have holding a position with English learners, it's really, or multilingual learners, I think it's critical for their advancement to participate, that they use their voices, they stop being silent, or participating in classes where the instruction doesn't require of them to take the risk and speak, and at the same time support them in this, because as we know, student discourse needs to be taught and scaffolded.
Thank you so much for sharing, Marianne. Anyone else? Steps you're taking in your districts or schools? Or any barriers you're experiencing?
Hi, I'm Mark Harrison, and I came in a little late. How you doing? I'm not in high school at this time. I've been at high school in several different states. But one of the big concerns is that when we look at society as a whole, and when things are strained in the larger society, it's going to carry over to the school. So how do you begin to change the mindset and the emotional level of understanding to make it comfortable enough for whoever, the teachers, the school board, and students to feel comfortable to have that dialogue, that open and honest dialogue a lot of times. And the big piece of that, how do you begin to help kids to understand, if I have a strong sense of identity of who I am, then it makes it more comfortable for me to communicate effectively with other people. What I learned in my study along the lines of working with students is that if they don't have a strong sense of who they are, they can easily be persuaded one way or the other. And a lot of times they become uncomfortable because we don't want to have that true dialogue. And how do we get to that level to have that true and honest dialogue at a comfortable level, a good mindset, an emotional mindset as well, that we can say, hey, let's listen to the other sides and hear this. What's the good? What's the bad? And be honest with that conversation. When we're dealing with curriculum in schools, 9 times out of 10, is who's presenting the curriculum. In what way? What's the understanding of the information and the materials that they're presenting, or the research behind what they're presenting? If you don't have a good concept of that or feel good about your own self-identity, it's very hard to project it to other people. And they can challenge you, cause controversy, and then you get lost in the true topic that you're trying to accomplish in the first place. So it's a lot go into it. It's more than the psyche than more than anything else.
Well stated, Mark. And those challenges really resonate with me too. And I would add to them that it's difficult to engage in dialogue with someone, especially if that person might feel attacked or defensive or threatened in some way, shape, or form by the topic or the ask. And so, how do we create that bridge for more meaningful and authentic dialogue where it feels like a safe space for all parties involved? Whose responsibility is that? You know, it brings a lot up for me. And Tamika, hello. I know you just joined. We're in a breakout room right now. We're just talking about steps that we all are taking as leaders and in our schools and communities to elevate the voices of Black and Brown youth.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah. Kenya, Tamika, John, Lisa, anything else you would add?
I will say that I am here mostly as an observer. I am not a K through 12 educator. I actually am a college, I'm an associate professor of criminal justice, and I am working to build, my research is building a leadership development program around some very similar issues. So our program's goal is to purposefully prepare entering and early career professionals to be catalysts of race equity reform from their frontline positions. So I've been experimenting with what that looks like. What does that mean? And so we're starting our, I guess in this iteration of the program, we just started our third cohort. So I'm still kind of looking and learning and interested in how others do it. And I certainly recognize that I am not an educator by training. And unlike some of my other colleagues, I don't think that knowing subject matter means that you know how to deliver that subject matter effectively. So I'm always interested in what the K through 12 space is doing.
I see a lot of heads nodding from the other educators in the room.
I was raised by educators, and so it's still mind-boggling to me. I'm a non-traditional academic, so I'm an attorney by training who now is an academic, and so it still is mind-boggling to me that the thought is because you have a PhD in X, that means that you can teach X, because the two are not the same at all. So anyway, I'm going to move back to my observer role and enjoy listening to you all. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you sharing, Kenya. Thanks for joining.
We want to hear more.
I always encourage, feel free to share links in the chat or anything if it feels relevant.
Okay.
John, what about you? Anything you'd like to share? Any barriers potentially that you've experienced?
So thank you, Zach. For us, we have an initiative at our school first. I'm a middle school principal here in Delaware. We, for the last couple of years, have had, as part of our motto, #OwnVoices, and that's been related to our work on equity, confronting and altering systems of inequity and discrimination. And what we've asked our teachers to be very sensitive to is who's speaking and who's not, and how frequently, right? So we've said to our teachers over the last 2 years, we've been working with TeachFX, for them to use tools. It doesn't always have to be TeachFX, but if it's not, develop a tool of their own to be sure not only that there's increased student discourse, but that they also are aware of who's speaking in the room, and that we then view that data with an equity lens. That work has been rewarding in many ways. There's clear conversation, and it's pervasive, I think, in our language here. And that's then taken root in the district. So as part of our strategic plan that we're developing right now, student discourse increasing as in its frequency and quality is actually one of our goals in the district-wide strategic plan. So that is obviously exciting. An obstacle is that there's a lot of fear from many teachers around the idea of being monitored or what they perceive as watched in some way, or I think in some ways having to present this data about what may or may not be happening in their rooms. So we've gotten quite a bit of resistance from our teachers union around using a tool like TeachFX, which we're still exploring what some of the resistance or questions are about, but that's an obstacle for us. And then we too are experiencing some pushback from members of the community, families who believe one thing about what it means when we say student discourse for each and all, when we need something different. So we're viewing that as an opportunity to have conversation, but well, just continuing to persist. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, John. And it looks like we have everyone back here. Great. As we all return to the full group here, wow, just so many good ideas that I've heard, great questions from my breakout room. I'd like to open it up to everyone briefly before turning it back over to Shawon. Can each group share maybe one idea that really stood out to them as powerful and something they could use today?
Yeah,
Well, Bess reminded me about one of my least favorite practices, the data chat, and she extended it as an opportunity to be a relationship and identity chat, which was a really nice reframing that I needed.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Bess. Any other questions that came up that you want, that you hope Shawon or others in the group can address?
I think I'm supposed to ask a question.
Go right ahead.
Where you want me to go? Okay.
Please.
So Shawon, I think I was nominated to ask the question, how would a district or an educator get started down the road of using vocal justice?
A great question. I promise I didn't plant that question to the group. And so our current core offering is our teacher fellowship model. We recruit teachers. We'll be recruiting our next cohort we're planning in summer 2022, who will be our teacher fellows for the 2022 to 2023 school year. To get involved with our teacher fellowship, our educators submit an application and then have an interview with us about their interest in our curriculum and how they would implement it at their school. And then they would join the fellowship in fall 2022 and then engage in monthly training and community building sessions with us and run their programming with young people throughout the school year. And to learn about the application and webinars, so we can let you know more about how to submit a strong application, you can sign up for our newsletter at vocaljustice.org. And I will put a link to that in the chat so you all have that. And the link to our newsletters at the bottom.
And Shawon, they would start in fall 2022 with a monthly training. How long would that go for? 1 year?
Yes, I would go for a school year, and they would be running the program with their young people and doing those training sessions simultaneously. So we'll have the monthly training sessions with our teacher fellows, and then when they're not involved with that, they'll run our program with their young people during the school year. And we're going to be figuring out ways to do larger partnerships with district-wise, but we're not quite there yet as an early stage org. But as those opportunities arise, we'll share that through our newsletter.
And forgive me for asking about all the specifics. So fall 2022 would wrap up like May 2023, June 2023, something like that?
Yep.
Okay. And are you interested in district volunteers for the new initiative?
Yes. So one of the things that we're actually doing January onwards is having conversations with school leaders and district staff to understand what it will look like to have a district-wide partnership. So if you're interested in having those conversations, I'll put my email in the chat so that we can connect, because we're trying to learn how we can further scale our work outside of the teacher fellowship model.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Other questions?
Shawon, how are you funded? You said, you obviously have outside funding and then you give funds to the local school districts or the individuals.
Yes, and that compensation for our teachers is really important for us in line with equity. We want to make sure our educators are getting compensated for the work they're doing with their young people. And we pay about $30 an hour now for the work our teacher fellows put in. And we're funded 100% philanthropically now. What we're going to be transitioning to in the next couple of years is having a mix of earned revenue and philanthropic funding, where we would have larger contracts with an entire school or school district, for example, for our services. And we're going to be spending the next couple of months to explore what that earned revenue model will look like in the long run.
Do you have a number of philanthropic, or do you have one like single one that took an interest in it?
Yeah, it's a number. We received some fellowships from Stanford and Harvard, where I completed graduate school, and then received some fellowships from early stage incubators that support social entrepreneurs, and then a few other philanthropic institutions and individuals.
So you're a nonprofit.
We're structured as a nonprofit.
Jamie, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Thanks. This sounds like something, so your vocal justice sounds like something that we could really incorporate in our civics curriculum in our school district. We're really actually currently finishing up a unit with our Delaware state standards that have students participating in government and how to contact with elected officials. So is this something that is designed to be an after school thing, or is it something that could potentially be included in a daily curriculum within a school district?
Yes, great question. It can be both. So our preference is that we have vocal justice integrated into an existing class, so that we limit selection bias from a young person who might be already eager to do a leadership development program, but we recognize that's not feasible in every site. So we also have some of our teacher fellows who run it as an after school club, or even as something over a lunch period. And over the next year, we're also thinking about how we can have our curriculum be adapted to whatever course that you have, so that it's not just a 1 hour standalone every week, but maybe you take a lesson plan or a pedagogical approach here and there and integrate it more fully into an existing course. Not there on that latter point yet, but for now, it can definitely be about an hour a week into an existing course or run as an after school club.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It seems really, really well, a really good match with something like Avid. Does that, I mean, does that resonate with anyone? Avid Excel, like to focus on Black and brown kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sarah, I see Sarah in the chat. She says she's nice.
Got it. Thanks, Bess.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Shawon, I'll just ask a question since there's silence. And I'm real interested in this topic, obviously. As you think of other like-minded organizations who you partner with, have you ever considered partnering with other organizations? Obviously, you're partnering with the organization that's sponsoring you today, but is that something that you're interested in, sort of as a way to flywheel your effort?
Yes, certainly. So the biggest partnership that we're thinking about are with existing youth advocacy organizations. We recognize that a lot of the learning around communication for social change doesn't just happen in the classroom setting, and we want to make sure our participants have chances to engage in real-world advocacy projects. So we're pursuing an effort now to identify who some of those youth advocacy organizations are, so that we can have a menu of options, if you will, for our young people, and say, hey, you went through our curriculum over a year. Here's some opportunities you can get involved with at the local, state, or national level to put some of those skills into practice. And then we're also thinking about partnerships we might have with out-of-school organizations that work with young people who have experienced significant hardship. For example, an organization that might support young people involved in the foster care system, for example, and how we can bring our curriculum to that space to make sure that they're getting access to our curriculum outside of a school setting.
I'm going to put one organization, New City Kids. It's out of New Jersey, and actually nationally, one of my colleagues is chairman of their board. And I've made a few donations to them, but New City Kids would be a perfect fit, I think.
Writing it down. Appreciate that, Nathan.
Yeah.
And that's inspired another question for me, for you, Shawon. I'm going to put a pin in it in a second, because I want to bring the discussion group question to you first, which is, can you share any strategies educators can do today in your minds to elevate the voices of our undervalued Black and brown youth in our schools?
Yes, well, selfishly, aside from signing up for vocal justice and using TeachFX, there's two things that come to my mind. The first is creating space in your classrooms or in your spaces wherever you are for personal storytelling. And I think what's important here is not just asking your young people to share their personal stories, but for you also to model that. Because what we found with, in my own experience running the curriculum and with our teacher fellows, is that our young people respond so well when they see our facilitators being vulnerable, being honest about their own lived experiences, sharing the highs and the lows, and it makes it easier for them to do the same. And entering that space without a place of judgment. We have our young people candidly about their experiences, what they love, what they don't, and just validating that and nothing else, I think, is really powerful. And the second piece that I'm a huge fan of is having young people actually inform what you do in the classroom. At Vocal Justice, we have regular exit surveys that we administer about what do you want out of the curriculum and what do you enjoy, what do you not. And I found when I was running the curriculum firsthand, I would let them know what I'm seeing on those surveys and talk about the changes that I was making real time to the classroom. And young people have lots of ideas, lots of good ideas on how to make changes. And I would say, asking them firsthand what is something they love, what's something they would change. And then the following week saying, hey, this is how I'm going to change things differently for you all, shows that you're not just checking the box of getting their voice, but that you're actually using their input to inform some of the decisions that's being made.
Yeah, closing the feedback loop. Well, final question then before we end it, inspired by Nathan. What can we do? What else can we do to help you, Shawon, in this journey?
I am really, really grateful, one, for the opportunity to be in this space. I'm feeling so energized being with all of you. And what I would love is to genuinely continue the conversation. We are a very early stage organization. We have an incredible group of educators right now, and we need to figure out how we can scale our work to the millions of young people who need it. So we're trying to figure out strategically, what would a partnership with an entire school look like, or an entire district? How might we have contracts set up? How might we work with organizations outside of a school setting to reach young people? We're really open to all of those ideas, and having a 30 or 45-minute conversation with you to inform some of our strategic planning process would be a huge help. And the second ask is that you have people sign up for our newsletter. We share the work of our young people through our newsletter and talk about what our teacher fellows are doing. And we hope that that serves as a form of inspiration for all of you as you continue doing this work.
Well, thank you, Shawon. We will, I know you've put your contact info in the chat. We will also share that out with everyone else after our session today. But with that, I want to wrap it up and thank everyone for coming and sharing your ideas, engaging with us, and especially you, Shawon, for being our guest of honor and sharing just the amazing work you're doing.
Appreciate that. And thank you, Zach, for creating the space for this and making it so interactive. It was incredible to connect with other people, and I hope you all got some good lessons from each other too.
Thank you, Shawon. Take care, everybody.